I made a joke about my dad's age at his promotion dinner. He stormed out and disappeared for 2 weeks. Our family counseling session revealed shocking truths. I, 28F, grew up in a complicated family situation that's left me feeling conflicted and unsure about how to navigate my relationships with my dad, 46M, and stepmom, 43F. To understand where I'm coming from, I need to give you some background. My dad had me when he was only 18. He was a senior in high school, captain of a football team, with a bright future ahead of him. My biological mom was 17, a cheerleader, and they thought they were in love. But when she found out she was pregnant, everything changed. She wanted to give me up for adoption, but my dad refused. He was determined to raise me himself, even if it meant giving up his dreams of playing college football. So, there he was, a teenage single dad trying to figure out how to change diapers and warm bottles while his friends were heading off to college. He moved in with my grandparents, who helped out a lot in those early years. But my dad was determined to provide for me on his own. He worked 2 jobs, stocking shelves at the local grocery store during the day and bartending at night, while taking community college classes whenever he could. Growing up, I didn't see my dad much. He was always working or studying. When he was home, he was usually exhausted. He tried his best, but he was more focused on making sure I had food on the table and clothes on my back than on being emotionally available. He was strict, always emphasizing the importance of hard work and responsibility. "I'm your father, not your friend," he'd often say when I complained about his rules. My stepmom came into the picture when I was 10. She was a regular at the bar where my dad worked, 3 years younger than him, with a bubbly personality that seemed to light up the room. I remember the first time I met her. She brought me a stuffed unicorn and spent the whole afternoon playing make-believe with me. It was the most attention I'd gotten from an adult in a long time. They got married when I was 12, and suddenly our little family of 2 became 3. My stepmom never tried to replace my biological mom, who I've never had a relationship with. Instead, she positioned herself as more of a cool-on figure. She'd take me shopping, help me with my homework, and always seemed to have time to listen to my preteen drama. As I got older, my stepmom and I developed a really close relationship. We have similar senses of humor and can spend hours laughing at silly memes or making up inside jokes. My dad didn't seem to mind, probably because he was always working and it meant I had someone to spend time with. But looking back, I wonder if he felt left out. Last week, we had a family dinner to celebrate my dad's promotion at work. He's been with the same company for 15 years, slowly working his way up from entry level to management. This promotion was a big deal. It meant more money, but also more responsibility and longer hours. My stepmom went all out for the celebration. She made his favorite meal, pot roast with all the fixings, and even baked a cake that said congratulations, in wobbly frosting letters. We were all in good spirits as we sat down to eat, my dad looking proud but tired as he talked about his new role. During dinner, my dad mentioned how stressed he'd been lately with the new responsibilities. Without thinking, I quipped, "Maybe you should take up yoga, Dad. I hear it's great for old people with sore backs." It was the kind of joke my stepmom and I would usually share, but as soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. My dad's face immediately darkened, his fork clattering against his plate as he set it down hard. "Is that how you speak to your father?" he snapped, his voice low and angry. "Show some respect." I was taken aback by his reaction. Sure, we'd had our disagreements before, but he'd never spoken to me like that. My stepmom tried to smooth things over, saying, "Oh, come on. She was just joking. You know how they are these days with their memes and whatnot." But my dad wasn't having it. He turned to her, his face flushed with anger. "This is your fault," he said, pointing an accusing finger. "You've always encouraged this behavior. She treats me like I'm some kind of joke because of you." The tension in the room was unbearable. I tried to apologize, stumbling over my words, but my dad cut me off. "I've had enough of this disrespect," he said, his voice rising. "I work my ass off for this family, and this is what I get? A daughter who can't even show basic respect and a wife who undermines my authority." He pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the floor, and stormed out of the room. The sound of the front door slamming echoed through the house, leaving my stepmom and me in shocked silence. After a few moments, my stepmom sighed and reached out to pat my hand. "He's just stressed about work," she said, but her voice lacked its usual confidence. "He'll calm down." But I couldn't shake off what had happened. It wasn't just about the joke. It felt like years of resentment had suddenly bubbled to the surface. Had my dad always felt this way? Had our joking around really been hurting him all this time? The next day, I tried to talk to my dad. I caught him as he was leaving for work, still in his bathrobe and drinking his morning coffee. But he was cold and distant, barely looking at me as I tried to apologize again. "I need time to think about things," he said, staring into his coffee mug. "Maybe it's time you started acting more like an adult and less like a teenager who thinks everything's a joke." His words stung, bringing tears to my eyes. I wanted to remind him of all the times I'd been there for him, how I'd supported him when he went back to school to finish his degree, how I'd always made sure to call him on his birthday even when I was away at college. But the words stuck in my throat. I'm hurt and confused. I never meant to disrespect my dad, and I certainly didn't think our family dynamic was causing him so much pain. My stepmom keeps telling me not to worry, but I can see she's upset too. She's been quieter than usual, spending a lot of time on the phone with her sister, speaking in hushed tones. I don't know what to do. Should I apologize again? Should I try to change the way I interact with my stepmom? Am I really being disrespectful, or is my dad overreacting? The whole situation has left me feeling like I'm walking on eggshells in my own family. I keep thinking back to my childhood, wondering if I missed signs that my dad was unhappy with our family dynamic. Was he always feeling left out when my stepmom and I joked around? Did he resent the ease of our relationship because he struggled to connect with me? I remember when I was 16, and my dad tried to teach me how to drive. He was so nervous, gripping the dashboard and barking instructions. I got frustrated and asked if my stepmom could teach me instead. The hurt look on his face. I brushed it off at the time, but now I wonder if that was a turning point. This whole situation has made me question everything about our family relationships. How do you navigate family dynamics when you're caught between two very different parenting styles? How do you show respect to a parent who sacrificed so much without losing the close, joking relationship you have with your stepmom? I feel like I'm being torn in two directions, and I don't know how to fix it. Has anyone else dealt with something like this? Any advice would be appreciated. I just want my family back. Update 1: It's been about 2 weeks since my last post, and I wish I could say things have improved, but the situation has only gotten more complicated. I tried to give my dad some space, hoping he'd cool off, but it seems like the tension has only festered. During this time, I've been staying at my apartment more, only coming home for brief visits. The atmosphere in the house is so thick with tension you could cut it with a knife. My dad has been working even longer hours, leaving before dawn and coming home well after dinner. When he is home, he barely speaks, just grunts in response to any attempts at conversation. My stepmom has been trying to keep things normal, but I can see the strain it's putting on her. She's lost weight, and there are dark circles under her eyes. She confided in me that she and my dad have barely spoken since that night, just exchanging necessary information about bills and schedules. Last weekend, my stepmom called me and suggested we all go out for dinner to try and clear the air. She thought a neutral setting might help us talk things out. Maybe if we're in public, we'll all be on our best behavior, she said, trying to sound optimistic. My dad reluctantly agreed, and we decided to go to this new Italian place downtown. It's the kind of restaurant my dad would usually love: white tablecloths, soft lighting, the smell of garlic and tomato sauce in the air. But as we sat down at our table, he looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. At first, things were awkward but civil. We made small talk about the weather and the food. I complimented the lasagna, my stepmom commented on the decor, and my dad nodded along. His response is monosyllabic. But then my dad started talking about work again, mentioning how he was pulling extra hours to secure a big client. His voice had a hint of pride in it, the first positive emotion I'd heard from him in weeks. Without thinking, I said, "Wow, Dad, you're really killing it at work. But don't forget to take care of yourself too. We don't want you burning out before you hit 50. I meant it as a genuine concern wrapped in our usual joking manner, But as soon as the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. My dad's face immediately clouded over, his jaw clenching visibly. He put down his fork with a clatter and said in a low, controlled voice, "There you go again. Always with the smart comments. Do you have any idea how hard I work for this family?" My stepmom tried to intervene, placing a hand on my dad's arm. "Honey," she said, her voice placating. "I'm sure she didn't mean anything by it. We're all just worried about you working so hard." But my dad wasn't having it. He shrugged off her hand and turned to her, his eyes blazing. "And you," he said, his voice rising slightly, "you're always taking her side. Do you ever stop to think that maybe your cool mom act is undermining everything I do as a parent?" The restaurant fell silent around us. I could feel people at nearby tables trying not to stare, their conversations dying down as they pretended to be very interested in their meals. My stepmom's face went pale, and I felt like I was going to be sick. My dad continued, his voice getting louder with each word. "I've been thinking about this a lot. This whole dynamic is toxic. You two gang up on me, make me the butt of your jokes, and then act surprised when I get upset. Well, I'm done being the punchline in this family." He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. He threw his napkin on the table and said, "I'm out of here. You two can enjoy your little laugh fest without me." With that, he stormed out of the restaurant, leaving my stepmom and me sitting there in shocked silence. The waiter approached tentatively, asking if everything was okay. My stepmom managed a weak smile and asked for the check. The drive home was tense and quiet. My stepmom gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white, and I could see tears glistening in her eyes. When we got back to the house, my dad's car was in the driveway, but the house was dark. We found him in the guest room, the door locked. My stepmom knocked softly, calling his name, but there was no response. After a few minutes, she gave up and went to their bedroom, leaving me standing alone in the hallway. I spent a restless night on the couch, unable to sleep, replaying the evening's events over and over in my head. I kept thinking about my dad's words. Had we really been ganging up on him all this time? Had our joking around really hurt him that much? The next morning, I woke up to find my stepmom crying in the kitchen. She told me that my dad had left early for a business trip and didn't know when he'd be back. His suitcase was gone, and he'd left a brief note saying he needed some time to think. I feel awful. I never realized how much our joking around was hurting my dad. But at the same time, I'm angry that he's acting this way instead of talking to us like adults. Doesn't he realize how much he's hurting us by just taking off like this? My stepmom is a mess. She keeps saying she should have seen this coming and that she never meant to come between my dad and me. I'm trying to comfort her, but I'm struggling too. I keep thinking about all the times my dad tried to connect with me, the driving lessons, the awkward talks about boys, the time he tried to learn about my favorite band so we'd have something to talk about. Had I pushed him away without realizing it? I'm not sure what to do now. Should I try to reach out to my dad? Give him more space? And how do I support my stepmom through this? The whole situation feels like it's spiraling out of control, and I'm not sure how to fix it. This family that once felt so solid now seems to be crumbling around me, and I don't know how to hold it together. Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and things have taken an unexpected turn. My dad finally came back from his business trip after 2 weeks, but the atmosphere at home remained tense and awkward. He and my stepmom were barely speaking, and I felt like I was walking on eggshells every time I visited. Last week, my stepmom called me in tears. She said she couldn't take the silence anymore and had suggested they all attend a family counseling session. To her surprise and mine, my dad agreed. He was hesitant at first, but he eventually said he was willing to give it a try. The day of the counseling session, I was a bundle of nerves. I hadn't slept well the night before, tossing and turning as I imagined all the ways this could go wrong. What if my dad exploded again? What if this just made everything worse? We met the counselor, a kind-looking woman named Dr. Martinez, at her office. The room was cozy, with comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. As we sat down, I noticed how tired my dad looked, the lines on his face deeper than I remembered. Dr. Martinez started by explaining the process and setting some ground rules. Then she asked us to express our feelings and concerns openly. I went first, my voice shaky as I explained how I never meant to disrespect my dad and how our joking relationship with my stepmom had always felt natural to me. "I love you, Dad," I said, feeling tears well up in my eyes. "I never meant to hurt you or make you feel left out. I guess I just didn't realize how our jokes were affecting you." My stepmom spoke next, her words coming out in a rush between sobs. She apologized for any hurt she might have caused and expressed her love for both of us. She said she never intended to undermine my dad's authority, but was just trying to build a positive relationship with me. "I remember when we first met," she said, looking at my dad. "You were so worried about how I'd get along with your daughter. I just wanted to make sure she felt comfortable with me. I never meant for it to come between us." When it was my dad's turn, he was quiet for a long time. Dr. Martinez gently encouraged him, and finally, to our surprise, he broke down. His shoulders shook as he sobbed, and I realized I'd never seen my dad cry before. "I feel like I've been on the outside looking in for years," he said when he could speak again. "I see you two laughing and joking, and I feel like I don't know how to be part of it. I've always felt like I had to be the responsible one, the provider. I didn't know how to be the fun dad." He went on to admit that his long hours at work weren't just about providing for us, but also about escaping the feeling of not belonging at home. "I threw myself into my job because at least there I felt competent," he said. "At home, I felt like a third wheel in my own family. It was a revelation. I had no idea my dad felt this way. All those times I thought he was being strict or distant, was he really just feeling insecure and left out?" As we talked more, other issues came to light. My dad expressed how he felt pressured to be the strict parent because my stepmom was so laid back. My stepmom admitted she sometimes used humor to avoid dealing with more serious issues in our family. Dr. Martinez helped us see how our actions, though not malicious, had contributed to the breakdown in our family communication. She gave us some tools to express our feelings more clearly and to listen to each other without getting defensive. The session was emotionally draining, but it felt like a breakthrough. For the first time in years, we were really talking to each other, not just around each other. After the session, we decided to go to a nearby park to continue our conversation. We sat on a bench, watching kids play on the swings as we talked. There were tears, hugs, and a lot of apologies. My dad told me he was proud of the woman I've become, even if he doesn't always know how to show it. "I look at you," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "and I see this smart, funny, successful person. And sometimes I wonder if I had any part in making you who you are." I told him how much I admired his hard work and dedication to our family. "Dad," I said, taking his hand, "everything I am is because of you. You sacrificed so much for me. I'm sorry if I ever made you feel like I didn't appreciate that. We're not magically fixed, but it feels like we're on the right path. We've agreed to have weekly family dinners where we can check in with each other and talk about any issues before they become big problems. My stepmom and I are trying to be more mindful of my dad's feelings, and he's making an effort to join in on some of our activities. It's a work in progress, and I know we have a long way to go. But for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful about our family's future." Update 3. It's been 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to share how things have progressed in our family. The weekly family dinners we started have become a cherished tradition. We take turns cooking, experimenting with new recipes, and sometimes hilariously failing. Last week, my dad attempted to make sushi for the first time. It was a disaster. Rice everywhere, uneven rolls, but we laughed so hard our sides hurt. It's become a time not just for eating together, but for really connecting. My relationship with my dad has improved significantly. We've started going on monthly hiking trips together, just the two of us. At first, it was awkward, we didn't quite know what to talk about. But as we've kept at it, we've found a rhythm. He's opened up more about his own childhood and the pressures he felt as a young father. On our last hike, he told me about the day I was born. "I was terrified," he admitted, as we sat on a rocky outcrop overlooking a valley. "I had no idea how to be a father. But when I held you for the first time, I knew I'd do anything to give you a good life." Understanding his perspective has helped me appreciate him in a whole new way. I've started to see the sacrifices he made not as things to feel guilty about, but as expressions of love. My stepmom and I still have our movie nights and inside jokes, but we're more conscious of including my dad. Sometimes he joins us and other times he doesn't, but the important thing is that he feels welcome. Last movie night, he surprised us by suggesting we watch a sci-fi film, a genre my stepmom and I love but he's always claimed to hate. Turns out, he'd been secretly watching some on his own to understand what we enjoy about them. There have been bumps along the way, of course. Old habits die hard and sometimes we slip into our old patterns. But now, instead of letting things fester, we address issues as they come up. We're all learning to communicate better and to consider each other's feelings. One of the biggest changes has been in my dad. He's made a conscious effort to balance work and family time. He even took us all on a surprise weekend getaway last month, something he's never done before. We went to a little beach town, spent days building sandcastles and nights playing board games. I saw a side of my dad I'd never seen before, relaxed, playful, even a bit silly. I've learned a lot through this experience. I've realized that family dynamics are complex and that what seems harmless to one person can be hurtful to another. I've also learned the importance of open communication and how unspoken feelings can create deep rifts over time. Our family isn't perfect, but we're stronger now than we've ever been. We're more understanding of each other, more open with our feelings, and more appreciative of the unique bonds we share. To anyone going through similar family struggles, I want to say that change is possible. It takes effort, patience, and a willingness to be vulnerable, but it's worth it. Family relationships can be complicated, but they can also be the most rewarding connections in our lives.